Jason K, yes, you're first, 1,000 pine points to you. DH, you're second with 500 pine points. And Captain Kerf is third, and you get 250 pine points. Welcome, everyone. Does Subway accept pine points? No, they do not. But McDonald's does, and Jack in the Box. Okay, so we have a special treat. We got Pedro here. Hi, Pedro. Oh, hang on. Don't say anything because nobody can hear you, but now they can. Perfect. There we go. So, yeah, thank you for doing this with me. You sent out a tweet a couple weeks ago saying, hey, is there anybody who wants to talk about things that matter? Or how did you phrase it?
The big questions in life,
the big questions in life, like what's the capital of South Dakota? Those types of questions, which is Pierre, by the way.
Yeah.
So why don't you do you want to tell people a little bit about yourself, or do you want me to say a little bit something about you that I found out?
Yeah, you can, whatever you want, Doug. Yeah.
Yeah. So I found a girl that you went to high school with. No, I'm kidding. Your claim to fame is you made the semifinals of the Spain's Got Talent?
In the finals, yeah.
The finals?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So who did you lose to?
So it was, I didn't know what was going on. It was such a beautiful moment. I actually didn't care much about winning or losing, to be honest with you, because the avant-garde type of music that I was creating and playing, the fact that I got to play all of that in prime time in Spain, that was a prize in itself. But of course, in Spain, anyone that does flamenco is going to always win. And I actually, as a Spaniard, I actually get it. I understand.
So you're from Spain, but you live in the U.S. now.
Yes.
In Nashville, is it?
Nashville, Tennessee.
Okay. I watched a little bit of your channel, which I linked in the description. And yeah, you did some amazing stuff. Not only amazing stuff. I used to play saxophone when I was
Oh, wow.
Yeah, when the Dead Sea was only sick. And but what's unique about you is you do unique things. Like you know how beatboxers, they do the beatbox, but then they also sing behind it. You're the saxophone version of that. Some of the things you did.
It took me some time, Doug. I remember I was studying saxophone, and in the classical contemporary side of things, I mean, I was good, but of course there were people that were so good. And I remember one time going on stage and I thought, wow, am I going to spend all my life doing things that other people do better than I do? And plus, I'm going to be playing only music that other people have created. So it was kind of a crisis, existential crisis. I wanted to find myself musically. And that's why one day I said, well, I need to do something about this. And I liked, when I was a child and all of this, I liked beatbox, and I liked mimicking sounds. I like ethnic music, world music, and I love movie and video game soundtracks as well. Descriptive music that is actually describing something that we can perhaps tangibly understand. And that's I started. That one day I went to my small garage in Spain, and I said, all the preconceptions of the saxophone, that the saxophone is supposed to be played like this, it's supposed to be held like this, or for example, the saxophone is only a monophonic instrument, like you cannot play chords with it. I kind of put aside all these preconceptions, and I said, I need to start from zero. And yeah, it was a beautiful journey.
Yeah, you took the saxophone and made it into a drum set as well, and and a microphone. And you are pretty good at circular breathing, I saw. Not too many people can do that.
Yeah, that was, I mean, circular breathing, Doug, this is something that once you know how to do, it's easy, Now the parts that was interesting for me is to just how can I add that as part of the message that is happening on stage, So it's not, oh, that's a cool technique, but what to do in order to connect with people while being on stage. And it was interesting. Yeah.
Well, in America here, the way you use that is you just play a really super high note for a long, long time, and then the
And you
crowd
do
goes
this,
crazy.
and
Yeah,
you do this
yeah,
with the
exactly,
saxophone.
exactly. But yeah, I never could do circular breathing on the saxophone, but I could do it in high school while kissing. Let me guess. I'm going to guess your favorite saxophone is the alto for control, but the tenor for sound.
Okay, so that's a good guess. I would say the tenor is my favorite one because of the register. It has a very good
Yeah,
full low sound, and then also with the right technique, you can actually get to very high notes as well. The alto is almost there. The soprano is it's okay, but it has its moments, you know. The baritone, oof, that's a good one too. But I would say the tenor is it's a good one.
what do you call it when you like on the alto, the high E F?
Altissimo.
Yeah, I never could really do that, and I even struggled getting a nice perfect. Is it F? The three
Yeah,
on.
F sharp.
Yeah, F sharp. Yeah.
For how long did you play, Doc?
I started playing in elementary school. I had a Russian band conductor, and he was super strict.
Mm.
And so he was good, strict but good. And so I played all throughout high school, and then I played in probably till I was 26, 27 in
Mm.
churches all
Okay.
across North America
Oh,
because
nice.
I moved. Well, I shouldn't say all across North America, but yeah, I played on the worship team in many different
Oh,
churches.
nice.
Yeah.
Oh, so this means that you were a Christian at what point in your life?
Yeah, I was a Christian. I was born and raised Mennonite. I don't know if you know what that is.
Yes.
And then I transitioned from the legalism to the personal relationship and went to a Pentecostal church where I found my wife. But she wasn't really a Pentecostal. I wasn't a Pentecostal. But we ended up meeting in that church. Then we went to a seeker
Nice.
sensitive church for a while, which is called the Willow Creek Model.
Mm.
Then I've been to Baptist for a little while. I don't like Baptist churches. And then I went to a
Mm.
Calvary Chapel. Then I went to few non-denominationals, and I ended up in a Presbyterian,
Oh, wow.
the conservative branch of the Presbyterian. I never was a Calvinist, but I love being
Mm.
around them because they give me a sense of security.
And well, that means that you actually took it seriously, like you searched and asked questions, I presume.
Oh yes, I was. I probably knew the Bible better than most Christians that I was around.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've I still read the Bible almost daily,
Mm.
even as an atheist. Um, I was quite familiar with most of the apologetic arguments, but of course, from a Christian perspective, I focused in on the pros instead of the cons to
Yeah,
each
yeah,
argument.
yeah.
But
Which
yeah,
is usually not, which is usually actually, I mean, if that happens, it wouldn't be a fair approach to the arguments. In order to know that the argument is actually valid, or yeah, actually to the point that we can approach its soundness, in order to know that an argument is sound, at least one should know that there are many counter arguments that make the argument at the end better or worse. So definitely, yeah.
yeah, I think in order to truly understand what you believe and why you believe it, you should be able to give the opponent's side. If you were in a debate, that people would never have guessed that you're a Christian if you're talking like an atheist. They would say, well, wait a minute, this guy's a Christian? I thought he was an atheist, the way he could defend or knock
Yeah.
down Christianity, however you want to put it. So, but yeah, right now I call myself an agnostic, both an agnostic and atheist. Not that agnostic is a adjective for atheist, but I don't believe any gods exist. I
Yeah.
don't live my life like that's true that a God exists, but I don't say that there can't be a God or there definitely is no God.
Mm.
I don't know. I am quite pretty much hard atheist when it comes to Christianity, though. I think it's Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism. In other words, I think all the religions of the world are wrong
Mm.
on their core propositions, but
Mm.
whether there's something more out there, I'm agnostic about that.
Yeah. Something to keep exploring. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm open to it. I always challenge people to, my marker in my life is a miracle. And
Yeah.
texts don't do it for me. And I think for many people like me. And so I often say, like, are you familiar with First Kings 18?
What?
First Kings 18 in the Old Testament. Are you familiar with that
No.
passage?
Mm-mm.
It's the part where Elijah is basically having a competition with the other prophets and their gods,
Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay.
and then he
Yes.
pours water over the wood.
Yes. 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 Okay. Okay.
And
Yeah.
so basically, that's the marker in my life that would convince me that Christianity is true, or any religion. It really is. Take a napkin, soak it in water, and then don't even need the matches, but just pray in the name of Jesus to light it up. I'm not trying to fool myself. I'm not trying to trick myself. If that happens, my confidence would be raised to believe that there's a supernatural realm, and then I would investigate whether I would believe. But the then question is, do you follow it? Right? That's the next question.
That's interesting that you mentioned in that case, because the type of miracle you're talking about is one that would kind of supersede the laws of nature, right? So
Yeah.
that is exactly what happens. What happens in that instance, and yeah, it's that I'm actually learning or reading a little bit about this distinction from natural and supernatural, and how some thinkers are starting to say, or to use the term supranatural, so that to the point of just this dualism with supernatural and natural. It's like, for at least for a Christian, those two things are one, but for the sake of a conversation, we divide it into two. But the worldview actually brings both together, and I think I found that conversation very interesting. But one thing I wanted to say, Doug, is that I applaud your initiative. I wish we had more opportunities in the world where people can come together, and that's what I do here in Nashville. I bring Christians and non-Christians together because if we do this only on social media, which, by the way, the internet is a good tool. Definitely, it's a very good tool. But these conversations that we can have together, when we have these conversations and people see us disagreeing, they can get two things. That's the potential about this. That's why I believe in these conversations so much. They can see, one, that we disagree, and second, that we disagree well. So therefore they can see, oh wow, there are people in this world I could have these conversations with. And hopefully when people see these conversations, they go home, or they're at home already, but they actually think, I think we could do this, or I can do this as well. I think it's a beautiful thing to do.
Yeah, I'm very encouraged by these types of conversations. I had one yesterday. I don't know if you saw it, but near the end of yesterday's live stream, I talked to a presuppositional apologist type
Oh yeah.
Christian. Are you
Yeah.
familiar with them? And
Yeah.
in my experience, those conversations always go badly.
Yeah.
But this one went well. And I was like, whoa, this is great. I love having my stereotypes blown apart. And so yeah, this is part of the rush I get from doing these live streams and why I do them. It's very enjoyable.
Yes.
So you ready to talk about Jesus, or do you have more questions about me?
No, well, it was interesting to know that you're a seeker as well. You're asking questions, and even in your period as a Christian, you kept asking questions. You moved from different churches and denominations because that means that you're a person that asks questions, and I appreciate that.
Well, and I am married, and my wife and I, it's a struggle to find a church that you both like.
Yeah.
And also that is not too emotional and charismatic, or too rigid and dank and stale. And it's like, it's hard to find that balance. And so when I was a Christian, it was like, it's either too fluffy or too meaty. I wanted a bit of both, and it's a struggle. But
go ahead.
I was just going to say, there's probably a lot of people in the live stream chat who, besides knowing that you played saxophone on Spain's Got Talent, so what's your story?
So I grew up in Spain, and I grew up in a very, very cool family. We love each other, and but we're not believers. And Spain's a very secular country, and it's Catholic, but very, very nominal. So when talking about God, you kind of referring to something that finds its roots in tradition, or you think
Right.
about God and, oh, this is a relic from the past, you know. Um, my family, I grew up, with my uncle and my cousin are Jehovah Witnesses. And so my father has had a very interesting journey through Christianity, Catholicism, and Protestantism. And then he became kind of I wouldn't say an atheist, apathetic about it. So apatheist is, I don't know if that's a thing.
Hmm.
Just being apathetic about the question of God. And then when I was growing up, uh, my personality, Doug, and this is something I really need to be careful about. By default, my mind always goes to the big questions. I promise you this. Like, I am walking around and I could be having a good time, walking my dog or doing something. My mind goes automatically to why am I able to walk at this moment? Why is there something rather than nothing? Why is my heart palpitating at this moment and I'm not actually controlling it? Why? So that's the way my mind has always been working. And when I went to this Catholic school that I appreciated, I didn't have a good time because I always had a very, very deep questions, I would say. I hope it's okay that I use that type of nomenclature, but I mean, it didn't mean that they were not deep. It's just perhaps they didn't expect these type of questions from an 11 or 12-year-old. But when I was asking these questions, answers were very vague. And then, of course, as a child, I was looking at the way people behaves, which is a very intrinsic part of the Christian life, because Christianity is not a philosophy that stays in the clouds that you can actually you're just there and then you live your life in a different way. It is supposedly, it's something that you need to live out, whether it's true or not. You need to live it out. There
Right.
are many types of philosophies that we can talk about in an abstract, vague, ambivalent way, and they can stay there and then you can live your life in a different way. I'm thinking about, for example, nihilists or nihilism, like everything is meaningless, while at the same time, we need to go to the supermarket to buy food and love the people around us and all this. But well, so when I saw a few things that I didn't like, I would definitely say that my judgment, my rationality in this judgment was poor. I was a child. But well, it got to the point that my questions were not being answered, and I decided to move away from my faith. So then I became, when I was 12, 13, I think, 13, I became agnostic about everything and apathetic too, meaning I don't care. Now, I think like you, I also thought, I looked around with my questions all the time, walking around my city in Cordoba, in Spain, looking at the sky, seeing all the stars, and I was thinking, like, this cannot be meaningless. I cannot accept that this is just a brute fact. Things are the way they are. That is how far I could go with my thinking. And music was the thing, Doug, that gave me a grasp of something beyond myself that would allow me to escape from a world that tangibly I couldn't understand. So I'm very thankful for my career
You know
into
what's
music.
what's interesting, Pedro, is oftentimes people who are really stuck on the big questions of life often are not the happiest.
Oh, that is true, 100%.
So, did you
Yes.
did you have a very unhappy childhood? Like, were you?
Okay, that's a very good question. So definitely, it was a good childhood. I was also very um, responsible kid. Like I was studying all the time. I was trying to do things well all the time. And when you want to have these type of conversations in my culture, in my community, not many people were interested in these questions. So I kind of felt alone. And the fact of not having people with whom I could have these conversations definitely took me to places sometimes like, feeling alone and feeling sad. And yeah, so I get it. That happens. Definitely. I agree with you.
And so, at what point decide that Christianity was true, or how did that happen?
Yes. So what happened, Doug? That's a beautiful question. What happened was after the finals in Spain's Got Talent, I got the opportunity to travel all around the world. You know, Scotland, Germany, Japan, Brazil, and all these countries. And then I was invited to a World Saxophone Congress. That's actually a thing. And when I was playing there, a professor from Nashville, a university here, saw me playing, saw all my techniques and my approach and the way I connected with people on stage. And she invited me to come to spend 3 months here in the States in 2012 as a guest professor, saxophone teacher. And then I came, and my English wasn't that good. That was in 2012. And during these 3 months, I got to meet many people, very interesting people. And one of them was the person who's my wife today. And when I met her, I usually, when I have conversations, this is actually very natural for me. Like, you and I don't know each other really well, but I feel so comfortable to be open with you and go deep because it is so natural to me. So we got to talk about this, and I started to recognize something different about my wife. Well, she wasn't my wife at the moment, but about her, and the way she understood life, the way she treated people, the way she actually reacts socially at situations that people usually get very worried or perhaps very strong-minded or rigid. She was flexible, she was innocent, she would antepose people's needs and feelings, and she would actually care about them. And when I saw that, automatically my first question was, so what is it about you that is different? And she talked. She said, hey, I'm actually a follower of Christ. And when she told me this in 2012, I need to be honest with you, my first reaction was, oh man, Christianity again. So when I started having these questions, I had the privilege of having someone in my family. My father-in-law was an expert in Greek, Aramaic, and Hebrew, and he actually translated a version of the Bible, the International English Bible, in the 4th grade English level. And he was a theologian and historian and expert in languages. So I am always open to ask the hard questions. And I had this amazing privilege to ask these questions to him. And when I started realizing that, hey, there might be something here, I said, you know what? I'm culturally prone to think that Christianity is going to be true because I grew up in a Christian context. I want to first read about all the things, I want to investigate these claims. I want to see whether thinking about the big questions in life is something actually that is rational or is actually just irrational, And what I did first, Doug, was to investigate claims in Western civilization in philosophy, from the pre-Socratics to today's thoughts, in philosophy. Of course, not like a very deep manner, but I spent perhaps 1-2 years doing that. In between is when I became a follower of Christ. But one thing that I realized through studying philosophy is that, okay, so thinking about the big questions and thinking about the potential existence of God without using actually the God of Christianity at this moment, just God as the concept, that is not stupid at all. It hasn't been stupid, and even atheists throughout history that didn't believe in God, they actually engaged with this question in a very rational way. Then what I did is to investigate claims from science, and that was very surprising too, because I realized too that in the scientific world, the beautiful limits of science.
Can I stop you here?
Definitely.
At what point did you? What is Christianity to you at this point when you were first researching it? Like, well, how would you have defined Christianity?
So, okay, that's a very good question. So you're asking me not what Christianity is, but what I thought it was when I was investigating.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, at that point, I didn't have a good knowledge about the gospel, or I didn't have a good knowledge of the person of Jesus. I didn't have a good knowledge about what the message was, and I didn't have a good knowledge about the context through which all this message was coming. So, I mean, I was very open to Buddhism. I was very open to Hinduism. I was very open to Confucianism. I hope I'm pronouncing that well. I was actually very open to Islam as well, because in Spain we grow in a culture that everything is kind of seasoned with in Muslim culture, with music, flamenco.
Because the reason why I asked this question is
Yeah.
because you mentioned philosophy and science and so forth, but really, does that have anything to do with whether Christianity is true?
Oh yeah. Oh, of course. So that's a good question, Doug. So I first wanted to know if the mere facts of believing in God, whoever or whatever God can be, was actually a rational thought. So I just wanted to first know what has happened throughout history with this thought. I didn't want to get personal with it, but is it actually irrational? Like it's complete irrationality to just believe in God.
Okay,
And
so the first step for you was basically some form of deism, and then you went to Christianity.
correct.
Okay.
You could say it that way, because deism, I'd never thought that God created the universe, to put it that way, and then he didn't interact with it. So, but for the sake of the conversation, we can say that yes, it was okay. The concept of God is rational. That was very important for me first, as an
Okay.
agnostic, and then after that,
See,
yeah,
I very rarely push back on that type of the philosophical God or deistic type God.
yeah.
What I'm more interested in is specific theism. So, how do you define Christianity today, and then how did you figure out that that definition was true?
Okay, so Christianity. The question is a good question, but um, defining Christianity as a thing that is static is not. Christianity is defined more but about what happened. It's kind of a
Right.
more a relationship, but definitely Christianity is the message, or the gospel is that there is a creator beyond space and time that decided to create space and time and matter, and he actually ended up creating the world in which human beings existed. He also gave the prerogative of having free will to decide if these creatures wanted to have a relationship with him. It seems that at one point they decided not to, and in order to bring those people that have free will back to him, he decided to become a human and die on a cross, so that we could understand through humility and his sacrifice, we can actually end up being in communion with him.
Okay,
So
yeah, and this is
that's
the part I'm really curious about with
yeah.
you is how did you figure out that a man 2,000 years ago was also a deity, a god, and died and rose again for your sins?
Yes. So yeah, so finishing with the philosophy and all the science and all this, very interesting. I keep doing that. I love it. And what happened was that as soon as I realized that the concepts of God, the existence of God, is not actually irrational, like it's a very rational thought that could be demonstrated throughout history, and it keeps happening in many different cultures beyond Christianity itself. So what I thought is I investigated different religious claims, and just to go directly to the point and not make it very long. What happens with Jesus Christ? So this is what happens. First of all, I realized that Jesus is a real person in history, according to scholars, and both Christians and secular scholars say that Jesus is a real person in history. I'm not a scholar, by the way, so but I trust them. Uh,
I'm not a
so
scholar either. I just play one on YouTube.
yeah, okay. So I trust them. So once I realized that this happened, then I said, okay, what about this claim? Okay, so Christianity has been around for 2,000 years, and for an idea to be alive for that long, that this means that this idea has something. At this moment, I'm not saying that it's good or bad, but there's something about it. It's 2,000 years. And not only is that an idea that has been around, but it has been actually changing culture for the good or for the bad. We can get to that conversation later. I think, of course,
can we talk about this 2,000-year point you're making? Because would a religion that's older than Christianity, would you say the same thing, that there has to be something to it? Okay.
Yeah, because this is evidence, Doug. This is evidence that there is something interesting about it,
But does the age of the religion have anything to do with its veracity, whether it's true or not?
No, not at all.
Okay.
What I'm trying to do here is to present to you a cumulative case of what it brought me to actually believe, like the fact that there's this idea of Christianity being true for 2,000 years and Christianity merging with culture and actually changing Western civilization, whether we want it or not. That is actually something to take into account, at least for me. So that is the only thing I'm saying. I'm not presenting an argument in which I'm saying, oh, the longer the religion is, the truer is going to end up being. So that was the part of history, and definitely when I read the Sermon of the Mount. And when that was kind of one of the first times I opened the Bible. I read the Sermon of the Mount, and I thought, this person is saying things that I would follow, whether it's a man, a squirrel, or a table. I recognize that he's talking about truth, and that's the way I saw it. Now, there was another very important thing for me, Doug, is I really don't understand death. This ties really beautifully for me with what I was saying about existential questions. Death is something for me I still actually struggle sometimes, because how creation, being alive, existence itself, and everything is bound to finish one day, even our lives. And then the fact that Jesus himself, the same person that was actually relating the Sermon of the Mount, is the same person that resurrected. It's just like bringing, and this same person was actually.
Why do you believe Jesus resurrected?
What?
Why do you believe Jesus resurrected?
Okay, so first of all,
because this is the real issue, right? This is
yes, that's First Corinthians. Yes. So let me finish what I was saying, and I'll get to your question. So when I realized that the person that was relating the Sermon of the Mount had the type of life that lived according to the Gospels, then he was actually equating himself with God and calling himself God. And then he actually resurrected and finished with the actual problem that creation itself has, not only us, but all of it. It was putting a lot of meaning in him. So that's why I decided to give my life to him. Now, the question is, why do I believe that he resurrected? With I would say that with Christianity, there are two ways to answer this. The first one is that I actually believe it happened.
Okay, but why do you believe it happened?
Okay, so that one thing that happens with these conversations many times is that many Christians are watching this, or many people watch these conversations, and like people need to have evidence all the time, to support a claim. I think it's something that you can actually believe and see and test it, with reality, and you can do that through history, through experience. That is not the way I do it. I just wanted to mention this. There is some evidence that we can collect through history and what happened with him, and of course the four Gospels and some of the mentions of Jesus throughout history, and how the apostles changed their attitudes, and how the concept of resurrection was new in a Jewish culture, and many other things that happened as well. And definitely for me, it's more experiential, because I think that death doesn't make any sense.
Okay, there's many things running through my mind right now.
Please. Yeah, please.
You said that Jesus he had this type of life. He said the things he did on the Sermon on the Mount. He
Yeah.
called himself God.
Yeah.
The first point I would make is, do we really know he even said those things? Or are
Well,
these records written decades after the purported events saying that he did?
okay. So the secular approach to this answer would be in terms of number of manuscripts and how they have been taken care of and copied. And according to the linguistics and linguists and people that actually understand about textual criticism, we actually can. Meaning, what we have in the Gospels, it's actually the thing that was written.
Yeah.
Now, the parts that it comes to believing that what Jesus is saying, how do I know all of this? The only way I could answer this, or one of the ways, is talking about experience. That if
Do you say other religions are wrong? Are you an exclusivist when it comes to Christianity? In other words, is Islam wrong? The core proposition of Islam, is it wrong? Is it false?
yeah, that is a good distinction that you made there. So the core proposition is wrong. There's something very important about Christianity, which is, hey, every single human being is created with the image of God. Meaning, this means that every single human being is going to be rooted in some type of wisdom. Is actually wrong as a statement wrong, and that's it. Wrong. Let's move on. I will never think that way. But then when you compare when you do comparative religion, and you compare the core basic principles, you cannot go through 7 heavens and then go to heaven at the same time. It's just propositions that
Yeah.
don't match.
The reason why I ask this question is I'm glad that you would say that the core propositions of Islam is wrong, false. I agree with you. But the reason why I ask this is that if I was to present to you, or if it were true that there were far more manuscripts for Islam than Christianity, that's not true. But if it were, would that mean that Islam is more likely to be true?
I mean, the fact that there are many manuscripts about this gospel is something to take into account.
But
We
but
do it with,
would it mean that it's more likely to be true?
well, in a cumulative case in which a person is actually very open to.
But just the manuscripts. If we're not looking at anything else, we're just focusing on the manuscripts. If we had double the manuscripts we have for Christianity, would Christianity be twice as true? If we had half, would it be half as true? If we had only one manuscript, isn't it like, if it's true, right?
Well, okay, so Doug, I mean, focusing on this only, I mean, we could do this, but saying yes to God is not something that only comes from textual criticism. So
I understand.
in the example that you're giving to me, just for the sake of the conversation, of course, like if we have, instead of 52,000 manuscripts, we have 100,000, would that mean that the truth has become truer? I would say no.
Yeah.
Meaning,
So yeah, we're agreed. And I'm just saying this to bring up the point. So often I talk to Christians and they want to bring in so many different things, and I like to focus at one thing at a time. And we're agreed that the number of manuscripts really doesn't tell you whether it can tell you whether they've been copied accurately,
yeah,
or precisely from one manuscript to another.
yes,
But it doesn't tell you if the very first manuscript that things came from, or the first few manuscripts that things came from, was true to begin with. Something that's false, that's copied a million times, all those manuscripts are still false. So that's one point. And you mentioned that Jesus called himself God and so forth. Have you heard me do my flying man thought experiment?
no, and whatever that experiment is, I want to be part of it. But
Okay.
before we go to this, if you allow me, Doug, because we finished that conversation about textual criticism and history. According to what we know, actually the manuscripts were very, 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 very close to what we have today, to the point of the percentage is really, really, really high. So I guess what you're saying is that the content, I mean, what we have is actually what was written. Now, whether the content is true or not, that's the conversation you were Okay, perfect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I actually disagree with that. I think you're referring to people like Gary Habermas and so forth, what they
Mm,
say. But I disagree with them because I think
okay.
the very first copies that we have are probably in the late first century, and we don't have those, but they
Mm,
probably were written in the first century, and nobody knows what those said.
hmm.
And so, but anyhow, that's beside the point. Um,
Me too, Bob.
the flying man thought experiment is basically something that I came up with to show whether one is consistent in their beliefs about certain claims.
Let's do it. I want to experience this.
So
Challenge me, please.
so I have an ancestor, great 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 grandfather, who said that he is God, God in
Okay.
flesh.
Hmm.
Now, if that's all we knew at this point,
Hmm.
that there's a claim that my ancestor was God. I don't believe that's true. How about you? If that's all you know at this point.
Okay. So, I mean, this reminds me of this small stories of in philosophical. How do you call these more these dilemmas? I mean, yeah, these points. I would say, yeah, I need more. I want
Okay,
to know
good. Me
more.
too. Me too.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
you and I, we hear this claim. We both agree that just because someone calls himself a god doesn't mean they're a god. It doesn't matter when, if it's yesterday or 2,000 years ago.
Yes.
You and I both don't believe it. And then I go into my attic and I come down. You're visiting me at my home, and I show you this book that it runs in my family line, and we open it up, and there's a creed of sorts that says that my ancestor, not only that he claimed to be God in flesh, but he could fly. In fact, he ran to the edge of the Grand Canyon and he just took off and flew like unaided,
Hmm.
no plane, no nothing. He just flew, and it says that he flew in front of 500 people. In this book, it says that, and it says that he flew in front of 12 of his closest friends, and finally he flew in front of a guy named Myron, who actually wrote this document that we're reading.
Hmm.
I don't believe that my ancestor could fly based on that. How about you?
If the final objective is to analogically compare this to Christianity,
It is.
I think the experiment is. I don't know if it's going to be successful, but
Well,
I'll just play with you, and
okay.
definitely I would say, okay. I have a few questions about this context already, but I'll play with you, and I would say, well, I want to know more about this person. I still don't believe that this is true.
Okay, so yeah, this is all we know at this point. So all my cards are on the table. The point of this thought experiment is to separate the cumulative case out
Okay.
and look and laser focus on one thing at a time.
Yeah.
So just because someone claims to be God doesn't make it so. I mean, we don't believe it. Just because there's claims of people seeing it happen, we still don't believe it. Now we're not throwing that stuff away. We're keeping that in our brains. But now I go up to the attic and I come down and I bring 4 different books, and they're diaries written by friends of my ancestor or friends of friends. And it says that my ancestor did miracles. It goes more on about some predictions he made, that he predicted that someday that he would fly. It says that he again was God in flesh, and he had an amazing message on the north rim of the Grand Canyon, where he talked about blessed are the poor, blessed are the meek, and so forth. And yeah, and it said that he made the lame to walk, the blind to see. I don't believe that happened, based on those 4 diaries. How about you?
I don't know. I'm puzzled because I'm trying to work with you and see how analogically this would compare to Christianity. Man, I just don't see it. But
So far, I have said almost exactly the same thing the Christian books say, right?
well, I
Now, not
disagree with
complete.
that.
I'm not. I agree with you. I haven't given all the other stuff yet, but
Yeah,
each
yeah.
each step of the way is mimicking Christianity, is it not?
No.
4 Gospels, 4 diaries, a creed in 1 Corinthians 15, a creed for my flying man. The claims are the
Yeah,
same.
yeah. I mean, if there were a case that was similar to Christianity, then I would say okay. But in this thought experiment, um, it's hard for me to play it because I mean I'll play it with you, but at the end, if you want me, please push me because I want to ask you questions about the thought experiment and things that are being taken for granted at the level of existence and at the level of rationality. But
Like, we could go on. I could tell you that there's claims that his friends, even their life turned around and they died for their belief. And why would they die for a lie? I still think that you and I are not different. I think you and I would look at these texts and look at these claims and say, you know what? Sure, some of this could have happened. Maybe these lives were changed radically, and maybe some of them truly believe that my ancestor flew and were willing to die for it. But do we really believe that my great 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 grandfather could literally run off the cliff and start flying around? And I really don't think you and I would believe it. I don't. And so this is the point I'm making with the cumulative case, that when you focus in on each point and we just add it on, I don't think it shifts us when it comes to the flying man.
I appreciate the thought experiment, Doug. I really do. But let me tell you, and please, actually, when I say something you want to actually push, challenge or something, say, hey, Pedro, give me a second.
Okay. I got permission.
Well, yes, yeah, no, definitely. But just I would appreciate if you just let me finish the thoughts. And you, of course, you've been doing this all the interview. Just definitely perfect, man. The problem with me is with this case is in order to build an analogy that would work with Christianity. For me, we need to start with the question: why is there something rather than nothing? In this example that you're giving me, there are people, there are books, there is a society going on, there is subatomic particles playing with each other. There's some subatomic particles that come together in order to create in such way human beings with rationality. People that are aware of their existence and they can think actually about their future and their past. We need to also think about what happens with Christianity itself, which the way it started all with Judaism, and before Judaism, and how God in the culture in which it surfaced was a God that it wasn't a thing, but it was a thing that it was tangible. There was something that was besides or beyond reality itself. So then after this, yeah. So go ahead.
I think I know where you're going with this, and in this thought experiment with the flying man, God exists. He created everything. He is real, but God chose my ancestor in this hypothetical to fly for a greater purpose. He gave him the power to fly. Well, he gave himself because he was God in flesh. So all those points that you're making still exist with the flying man thought experiment. But I think you and I would still say, nope, don't believe it.
Well, okay, so it would be the same. Then my question would be, how is it possible that there's only one book written about your ancestor?
No, there was five. I told you about five, four diaries. And then I told you about the Creed, which was in a separate book. I could paint the picture very similarly, if not exactly, to Christianity. And I think if we go very slowly through each one by one, each part of the cumulative case, I think there might be a point where you and I would separate and you would say, oh, actually, I believe that your ancestor could fly now. And maybe there would be a point where I would too. But what's interesting is I think that we are very much the same. Our skepticism is high, and we just don't view that type of evidence as sufficient for that type of claim.
Okay. Well, That is, I hear that. Now, again, Doug, a thought experiment is the objective of this thought experiment is for you to bring me to the conclusion that analogically, this thought experiment and Christianity are the same. And this cumulative case can be used in order to undermine the Christian faith, but not only the Christian faith, but perhaps even any claim that would be similar to this one. But the problem with thought experiments is that once we stop them and we go back to reality, there's only one Christianity. And that's why that thought experiment wouldn't work. Because here's the thing. If this were true, if this actually were true, your great, 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 great grandfather was able to do this and these books and all of that, as a human being, I'm alive. I'm asking questions. I am wondering about the reason why I wake up in the morning and why do the reason why I exist. Sorry, I lost my train of thoughts. Again, when I put all this evidence together that you put in together about this person, and then I bring together analogically the Christian faith, I don't see how those two match, because this is what I wanted to say. There's no case like Christianity. Like, there's no case like Christianity in reality. So that's why I think that thought experiment, as useful as it can be, it doesn't actually end up being analogically.
Let me push back on that comment. There's no case like Christianity. Does uniqueness make it more likely to be true? Like, when you say there's no case like Christianity, I'm hearing you say, well, Christianity is unique in its claims. Yes. It's unique in a lot of things. But couldn't we say that at least in some respects, all religions have some type of uniqueness?
Oh, yeah, definitely. But the thought experiment, Doug, was actually bringing an analogy about... So what I'm doing with the thought experiments is actually saying, hey, what if, Doug, this thing that you're talking about were true? And it was exactly the same story, like 1,600 years of this book being written with a progressive narrative that is talking about reality this way. And so if that existed too, and we had the same evidence for it, and we haven't talked about this yet, but the experiential level of it, if we had the same, then of course this thought experiment would be good in reality. But since it's not true, then I cannot see how analogically would lead me to this.
Okay, so we are agreed that my thought experiment isn't true, but we're disagreed on whether Christianity is true.
Correct.
The purpose of the thought experiment is to bring up that inconsistency I'm perceiving in you, that you would not believe a similar claim, at least when you look at it individually, claim by claim, based on that same type of evidence for the flying man. And I'm wondering, why is that? And I think you already mentioned it, and you mentioned experiences.
Yeah.
But even then, I don't even have to go to other religions in the world and talk about their spiritual experiences. I can go to the flying man and say, people's lives are radically transformed. I have a cousin who was an addict. He was doing heroin. He was almost on death's door. He learned about his ancestor, the flying man, and his life totally changed at 180. And now he is a productive member of society. I can give you countless examples of people experiencing the flying man in dreams and visions and in worship. I could go on and on like this, but not for 1 second do I think you and me would say, oh, that means my ancestor actually flew.
So your claim is that believing, in my case, that Christianity is true is not rational, because I'm leaving out many other system of thoughts that could be true. Is that what you're saying? I just want to understand.
I'm not saying that you're irrational. What I'm saying is, I think that this thought experiment brings out inconsistencies in you.
I see. Okay.
And so the question is, if this evidence for the flying man actually existed and you did not believe it, and yet you believe Christianity with similar evidence, if not exact, that would be an inconsistency. And I think when I've done this thought experiment to other Christians, what they're forced to say in the end is, well, if at the end of 3 hours of going through each piece of evidence for the flying man, I guess I would have to believe in the flying man. Because if they say they didn't, then they basically have to say, well, I don't believe that Jesus rose from the dead either.
Yeah, I mean, if you accept the thought experiment, you go through it till the end. Perhaps you could say that, but when it comes to coming to reality and seeing what actually happened, the thought experiment falls short
But
from
what
my
that's
perspective.
this is the real question though. What actually happened in reality? And I would submit we don't know.
Okay, that's the way you see it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I would even go further and say that it is more likely that Jesus didn't rise from the dead than
Okay.
did.
Okay.
And
What do you think that? I'm actually interested in hearing and learning.
for the exact same reasons that the flying man example has shown, it's the prior probability of a man flying is so incredibly low.
Hmm.
There's no logical contradiction in it. There's no logical impossibility. It could have happened, but the prior probability is so low that you would need an enormous amount of evidence to overcome that in order to believe that my ancestor did fly. And that
Hmm.
same holds true with the evidence we have for Jesus's resurrection. So
So, Doug, in terms of probability, for example, I know that sometimes it's just difficult to choose a number. So,
yeah,
uh, by the way, that thing that you just shared, it's incredibly fair. I mean, it's so fair because, yeah, definitely. I mean, you were talking. I smile a little bit because you were talking about the prior probability for the resurrection of Jesus. And definitely, we can also talk about the prior probability of existence,
yeah.
or prior probability that the universe is the way it is and not different. But now, so throughout the conversation, it seems that miracles or something that deviates. I don't know if it's fair to put it this way, or to actually to supersede the laws of nature. It's actually it should be actually carefully discerned, right? I agree with you. Now my question is for you, in terms of evidence and probability for Christianity to be true, where is your number? More or less like zero? Is there something that you see that has happened
No, I
throughout
wouldn't say
history?
zero. I would say
Okay.
it's non-zero, but it's still so incredibly low. Uh, you can believe a God exists. You can believe that
Hmm.
miracles are possible, and still say, as a Christian, I think that the prior probability of someone being raised from the dead is low. Like God is not in the business of raising people from the dead left and right. Like
Yeah, that is true.
let me ask you, how
Hmm.
many people in history, just a guess, do you believe rose from the dead?
Okay, so that is a very fair question. The
After
prior
several days, let's
probability.
say.
What?
After several days, let's say. I'm not talking about someone who has
Oh
a
yeah,
heart
yeah.
attack and is dead for 10
Yes.
minutes or whatever.
Yeah. So I wish I had all this knowledge of the world that could keep track of every single case of every single human being that has lived throughout history. The case for Jesus, one of the reasons why it seems more probable that he resurrects is, and I'm explaining it this way for the sake of the conversation, but I believe it in my heart to be true. Now I'm leaving this aside if possible, just for the sake of argumentation and evidence. It's just because of everything that happened after it, and actually what this resurrection means for so many people, and actual people's changing their lives today because of this event that happened 2000 years ago, miles away in first century Palestine. So the probability for something like this to happen in history is actually as well very low, but it's actually happening. So
Like Craig Keener has a book of miracles, and I think some of them he has listed people who have died and rose from the dead.
yeah,
I'm not sure if you're familiar with Craig Keener.
I have heard about him. Yeah.
Yeah, so he has a big, thick book on miracles.
Yes. Yes. Uh-huh.
So let's say there were, I don't know, 20 resurrection claims in that book from Christians today, contemporary miracle claims. Do you believe them?
Well, that is a good question. The first thing about Jesus that is special is that he called himself God. And John, for example, used the term logos as the principle of creative order. From first time this was used was Heraclitus, the pre-Socratics. And there are many things about Jesus, the way he lived his life and the way he talked to people and the way he
But
treated
I'm asking you if
people.
you believe that the claims, when, like, there was one specific claim I remember where some person was playing with a snake in Africa, died. They
Hmm.
took her to some Christian pastor or priest or whatever, prayed for her, and it was like, oh, I think about a day later, because they
Yeah.
had to go travel, and she came back from the dead. Now, my question for you is, do you believe that actually happened?
Well, I cannot believe about that as soon as I see it, because I actually agree. In my skeptic heart, as agnostic, that was the way I found Christ myself. It started from skepticism, meaning a healthy skepticism that we all should have, which let's ask questions about this.
Okay, what questions would you ask?
Well, the first question is, resurrection is something that usually doesn't happen. We agree with that,
Hmm.
because if it would happen, then we would see people resurrecting all
Right?
all the time. So if this happens, there must be something special going on here. It's not something that naturally it happens as a law of nature or
But
something
what would
like
you need
life.
to know? What questions would you ask? What would you need to know for this specific claim that happened in our lifetime, that
Yeah.
someone was dead for like 24 hours or more and came back to life? What would you need to
Well, it
know?
would be very interesting to see, for example, sociologically around in their community, in their city or states, and the history of it. If this person has a history of claiming doing miracles or something, like, this is not just an event that I would say, okay, it happens, then okay, I want to see if it's true. If this is true, this means that this person supersedes the laws of nature, which, by the way, I don't think that you destroy them when a miracle happens. You just supersede them, but that's a conversation for another day. So if this happens, this means that there's something important that people clearly would see that this is true. It wouldn't be something that would be kind of difficult to attest. And with Jesus, you can actually, you have evidence to attest
But what evidence
that.
would you need to know that this person in our lifetime actually rose from the dead? What would you need to see, learn?
First, I would like to, for example, okay, at first I would like to see that this is a real person. That's for sure.
And how would you
Then,
do that?
ways to do this. If I can have a first a life experience with this person, I would definitely do that. I would have done that if Jesus was alive, by the way,
Okay, no,
and,
but
and
what you just
physically,
said is a great point.
physically,
When
which is
I,
a great point. But now
because you can't do
there's
that with Jesus 2,000 years ago.
okay. So this is very cool, Doug. Throughout history, this is why we need to talk about reality too. We talk about many characters throughout history that we haven't experienced, that we believe that they're true because of a few manuscripts that we know about them. This has happened before, so there's not only one way to attest that a person has been alive. That's what I'm trying to say. Now, if I could, definitely I would go to this person. I would ask him. I would see if it's true. And of course, something that we shouldn't forget, I would like to focus on the intentions of the heart, because if I'm comparing Jesus with other people, I would like if I would like to see if the claims uh, match up to what we know.
That's where we're different.
In
I agree with you. Everything you've said. I'd want to see if this person actually exists, and then go see this person and talk to this
Yeah.
person and so forth. Talk to the people, to the person who performed the miracle. Talk to other people. All of which we can't do for Jesus. But where we deviate, what did you say? There was something oh yeah,
History.
the motivations. I could care
Yeah.
less about the motivations. I'm just curious right now about the claim. Did this person rise from the dead or not? Can we verify this? And you and I are the same. We would want to go investigate for ourselves, or if we had lots of money, spend time with these people, see if we can duplicate it, see if we can see at least some of the other miracles that this person is performing. Ask questions like, well, how do you know the person was dead? And maybe they were just a very low pulse rate, and because they got bit by a snake, and maybe that just brought their pulse down, and that person was alive, but they just thought they were dead. Did they have machines to figure out whether the person was dead? And so you and I would probably ask the same questions, do the same things, none of which I think we can do for Jesus and his resurrection.
Well, that's when we part ways, Doug, because you know that this happens also in many areas, in fields of knowledge. There's what I call evidence for his existence. the evidential side of it, for me, it's a very good case for his existence. And
His
as I said
existence
at
is
the
irrelevant, really. I mean, of course, Jesus had to exist, but it's
yeah.
like that's like very low on the evidence list.
Okay, well, you see it that way. That I respect that, definitely. I don't think that that is because I claim like that. Imagine, Doug. I actually sometimes think, what if all of this is actually a lie? I don't want to live my life waking up every morning or praying to God, having conversations that are imaginary conversations I'm having with a person that doesn't exist. Like, these are all fair questions. Now, um, the type of evidence that you might consider irrelevant, um, I don't think that I see irrelevant at all. I mean, we have mentioned that there are many ways to consider or to actually think about the potential existence of a person that we haven't had a relationship with, for example, in terms of history, in terms of the movement, in terms of the things that caused, in terms of how radical the thought was inside of the socio-cultural context from which it emerged. And there's so many things that we can say about this. But one thing about this, Doug, that is very important to you. Christianity, as I said before, is not a philosophy of life that you just, of a philosophy, let's say, a way of thinking, a systematic approach to life that you just think about and then you just live your life different from it. Like, it comes directly. If you don't live it out, then you don't understand what Christianity is. Now,
But
with
living it
this,
out
I'm not.
is no testament to whether it's true. Like Mormons live out their faith all the time. In fact, I would say Mormons are more practical than evangelical Christians, more living it out than evangelical Christians. They live it out like they truly believe it, and that
Mhm.
it is true. But I don't think you and I think the core propositions of Mormonism is true, do we?
Yeah. Okay, so one point about this, the experiential side of it, of things, is this: when when you compare, for example, now that you mentioned Mormonism, when you compare Mormonism and Christianity, which is, you actually compare, you're just adding something to what it was. Uh, the fact that in terms of evidence and history and all these things that we're saying, the facts that we have, I think the number is, and forgive me if I'm wrong, 52,000, I think, manuscripts. Like, that fact about reality, that's a fact that can be tangibly assessed,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't change, Doug, the way I'm going to relate to the next person I'm going to have a relationship with. With this, I'm saying this: the core value of Christianity is actually, the core value is a relationship.
Do you believe
So,
you have a relationship with Jesus?
oh yes.
Okay, I know you have to go soon, but I really want to ask this last thought experiment question about relationship. I'm up in heaven with Yahweh, and Yahweh leans over to me and says, "Hey, Pine Creek, you see Pedro down there? I cut him off 10 years ago." No, you've only been a Christian for how many years?
7.
7. I cut him off 3 years ago, let's say. I don't hear his prayers. I'm not guiding him. I'm not directing him. I cut him off just like I did some times in the Old Testament. I cut Pedro off. But here's the thing, Pine Creek, I didn't tell anyone. You're the first person I've told. I haven't told Pedro. I haven't told anyone. Now, here's my question for you, Pedro. How would you even know the difference whether God cut you off or not? How would you know that you have a relationship with God or not? You still think you do. You still believe you do. You still act like you do. But in reality, you didn't. How would you tell the difference?
That is actually a very good question with a very easy answer.
How?
Um, so I think that the way Jesus lived his life is a very honorable and, how do you say this in English? It's like the true way to live life. Let's put it this way. So if I read the Gospels as considered the Word of God, this means that by reading the Gospels and reflecting my behavior to what the Gospels say, that means that automatically the promise is that my life is going to suffer a change. Now, these thought experiments that you have placed, again, it's a very good thought experiment, but it doesn't fully analogically compare the two situations at all. And you mentioned a little bit about the Old Testament, perhaps, Doug. By the way, I'm enjoying this so much. If I could have the privilege to be invited, or you can be in my show, it would be my privilege to spend more time with you in the future, if this was interesting for you. But that is the way I can claim I have a relationship with him. Like, I see the Gospels, I see how challenging they are. One of the most difficult things I've ever done in my life is to try to be a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
If I put this into practice and this doesn't actually even work, nothing happens, then of course there's another way to evidentially, experientially claim that there is something going on. So,
Yeah, I see. I know you have to go, but I see this
I'll
as
give you 10. No, sorry, not give you. I think I can. Let's do 10 more minutes. It is okay.
okay. What you
Please
just said,
push.
I see it as a circle. I see, because we spent a lot of time talking about the evidence for Christianity, the historical evidence, and then towards the end of it, you brought up words like experience and living out the belief and so forth, and that's why I asked you this thought experiment. And then when I asked you the thought experiment about how do you know you really have a relationship or this experience of Jesus, you went back to the history, and to me, it's like this vicious loop of well, I know the history is true because of my own personal experiences, but I know my own personal experiences are true because of the history, and it's kind of like, you see what I'm saying? You're kind of
So how would you help me to get out of this presumed circle that you see? How could I come out of it so that, according to you, my belief was more rooted rationally with reality?
I would simply ask the what's more likely question. And ask yourself, what's more likely that a man 2,000 years ago who existed, maybe apocalyptic preacher of the Essene movement, who was a Jew, what's more likely that this person existed and died and that's it, or that this person existed and died and rose again? What's more likely, that he actually rose from the dead, or a book just says he did, based on writings that, except for Paul, are anonymous, written decades after, using the Old Testament as a template for a lot of the narratives, like Jesus's last words and so forth. John the Baptist and Jesus is reflecting Elijah and Elisha at the Jordan River. There's even a lot of the miracles. A lot of them come straight out of the Old Testament. What's more likely? Ask that question. What's more likely, that Jesus did these things, said these things, or that these were ideas, reinterpretations of Old Testament scripture to create a narrative for a movement of people who were sad that their hero, their leader, had died? I think the what's more likely question is a powerful one, because when it's applied to the flying man, you and I are dead on agreed. But when it comes to Muslims in the Quran, Christians in the New Testament, Jews in the Old Testament, it's like, then all of a sudden everyone disagrees with Pine Creek.
Okay, so then first of all, again, with that thought experiment, you're saying that we would agree completely
with the flying man.
But with the flying man, okay. I'm sorry, flying man. So, so if again, this is just, then it doesn't apply analogically to Christianity. Now, to give you the points. Now, if we were to live in a vacuum, and this is the only thing I would know about reality, this story that you told me, then perhaps I would get to the same conclusion. But the way we experience reality about humanity, the way we experience reality is not that. So I wish it would be a good example. But now, when you're talking about, Doug, about the probability, the way you say it is, what is more likely? One thing I would say, as you were sharing this question and this thought with me, you started mentioning a few things about the Old and the New Testament that was actually giving you a case for your probability, with which I couldn't interact. And we could perhaps one day talk about all those things if you want to. But in terms of what is more likely, Oh yeah, that question is a very good question, and you can take it from different angles. I mean, let's this would deviate the topic, but just as a comment, if you allow me, Doug, this is so difficult for me to get. Like at root level, there's no human being that knows nothing. Like we don't know anything. That's at least many people, many students of philosophy. I'm not a philosopher. I just love philosophy. Uh, we don't know anything at the scientific level. The only thing we're doing is to describe things. We don't know what things objectively are. We know things that are going to be happening tomorrow only by using the inductive method and perhaps by inference to the best explanation. Some of the characteristics and features of God we know as a cause and effects simile, we can deduct perhaps, induce. Is that the way you say inductive? Is that the verb for inducing?
Inducing, yeah, we can induct, we can induce.
Deduce. Well, let's say deduce, but it's not
It's not deduce. No, yeah,
it's
deductive,
not
yeah.
deductive. But you guys understand me. We can deduct that
Infer is the word.
Infer, yes. So we can infer when we see reality. We can infer, okay, the way the mind works, like creation. Okay, it could be a creator, but for example, the things that I know about God, Doug, and I don't have any problems to say this to you. Some of those things I don't know because I came to those conclusions myself. So they had to be revealed to me. If not, I wouldn't have known it. So, like at root level, humans, we actually don't know we don't know anything. So,
I know I'm not omniscient.
Yeah, definitely.
I know I'm not. Yeah, I know I'm not omniscient. So we do know things, right?
But we know things. But my point is, as human beings, let's put to the side the fact that we disagree in our worldview. Like we don't know objectively what things are. We can only describe things, and we can talk about things that have been revealed to us. So my point with all of this, and let me finish this,
okay,
and you can push me.
Okay.
My point with this is, of course, I need to talk about Jesus from all these different venues. I need to use my experience as a person, but the fields of knowledge I can interact with, and also my life.
Okay. Yeah, I would say that I know where you're coming from, especially if you've studied philosophy. When you say we don't know things, you don't almost have to be a god to know the ontological something perfectly. But I think you and I would say, hey, we both know that when I let go of this pen, it's going to drop. We know that. Now, could we be wrong? Could it go up? Sure, especially if there is a God who can violate the laws of nature. But
those small comments at the end.
Yeah, you love those
small comments at the end. I love those.
But let's end it where we began it. And one of the first things you said on your story of Christianity is your wife. You talked about your wife, and you had these big questions about this, maybe deism and so forth. Do you think if your wife would have been a Muslim and she came from a Muslim family, you'd be a Muslim today?
I love this question so much. Oh, I really do love it, because this was my first thing about my Christianity. Like I still think about this, but I find so much peace when I realize that there are people that are way more intelligent than I am that came up with the concepts of genetic fallacies, so that I know, even though I got to Christianity through, which is by the way very gospel-like, through a person, the way I got to Christianity in my life doesn't change the claims of Christianity.
True.
At all. So,
but I asked you, do you think you'd be a Muslim today if your wife would have been a Muslim?
Who knows? I mean, the way I did it, I investigated all. Oh no, sorry. What I meant with this, in Spain, we are very we usually exaggerate the way we. So I didn't investigate all claims for religions, but I tried to investigate as many as I could. So I would do the same, and perhaps in this, if Alan Guth is right about inflation theory, and there are many multiverses and infinitude of cases there, perhaps in another universe, my wife were Muslim, I would have become a Muslim. I cannot answer this question to you at this moment. The way it happened, though, is that the evidence actually helped me and supports the facts that Christianity is true for me.
Yeah. Can I summarize my take on you at risk of offending you?
Oh, but please,
Okay.
that's why we
I'll
have
do I'll do
conversations.
it quickly. But I see, when I hear your story and when I see you and listen to you talk, I see someone who from a very early age struggled with this type of existential angst. It's like really those big questions. Why are we here? Why is there something? What about death? Is there something more? Why do I get up in the morning and then go back to bed and get up in the morning, go back to bed and just do stuff in between? There has to be something more. So you had this need, this emotional, psychological need to get some questions answered. Fast forward many years, you meet this beautiful woman. I'm sure your wife's a beautiful woman who happens to be a Christian. The Christian worldview does answer these questions, and they answer these questions in a way that you found satisfactory. And then it just happened to be that your wife's father was an apologist and could
A
answer it.
Bible
Yeah,
translator.
Bible translator could help you with some of your questions, and it just culminated into this perfect fit. You got a need over here, and you had an answer to that need right there, and boom. And when you mentioned that earlier, there were people in the live stream chat kind of smiling because I have what's called the Pine Creek theorem, and I've been proselytizing this theorem for years now, which basically says that women have converted more men to Christianity than the Holy Spirit could ever do. And so when you mentioned that your wife early on, the people were noticing in the live stream chat, but I didn't say anything at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so the real question is, since this happens so frequently in every religion, not just Christianity, when you have this need and you're perceiving that you're getting your questions answered, and you live and love someone who also believes this, it taints how you look at the evidence.
Mm.
And so when you see a book or someone saying like Habermas, oh, look at the transcripts and we can know what the original said and so forth, this builds up your confidence. And
Yeah.
it says to you, oh, I have good reasons. I'm rational to believe this. Now, someone who's outside the faith, they look at the same thing and they say, oh, wait a minute, that doesn't mean anything. Popularity doesn't mean it's true. And by the way, there's only like 65, 75 manuscripts in the first 200 years. So most of it comes later, and and then same with personal experience, same with martyrdom, same with eyewitness accounts. And so it gets to the core of why do some people see the evidence as sufficient and others don't? And that's where
That's a good question.
what really separates me and you is.
So let me apply the Pine Creek theorem to you. If we did a psychoanalysis of your life since you were a kid till today, do you think that we would get to the conclusion that would lead us to the conclusion that it's natural that you are an atheist? Oh, sorry, you said agnostic.
I'm both. I call myself both. But
Perfect.
My wife is a Christian.
Okay.
My family's a Christian. My life would be so much easier if I could force myself to believe Christianity is true.
Okay.
Raising two kids with different worldviews is not easy.
Yeah.
I do see the benefits of Christianity. I do see that it does give people hope, meaning, and purpose. Now, I don't believe and am not convinced it's true, but I think all my bias points in another direction. I shouldn't say all. I'd say a lot of my bias points in another direction. In other words, I think there's even a lot of atheists listening right now who they might not admit it publicly, but I think a lot of them would say, you know what? I kind of wish some of this was true because life sucks. It'd be nice if there was a heaven or even a hell because I was raped when I was a kid or whatever. Someone might be saying, you know, I wish, you know, God could have vengeance and have a hell. And so I'm telling you all this to say that I think no to your answer. I just can't see myself force myself to believe this. I'm not convinced it's true. I don't think we choose what we believe. I think over time we either become convinced or we don't. I don't think we have the power over our beliefs. at least in the short run. Maybe in the long term, we can put ourselves in situations that will change our minds. But at this moment, it would be next to impossible for me to believe that Christianity is true, just like it'd be next to impossible for you to believe it's false at this moment.
Okay, so one comment about, and thank you for sharing all of that. One point about this, if the Pine Creek theorem, I hope you one day write a book about this. I would like to get the first copy and sign. So, and all these friends that are watching this, if from this conversation the conversation dilutes to the fact that we got to talk about all these claims, and it dilutes to the fact that I knew about this claim through a person, that for me, besides knowing it is known as an actual fallacy, it would be, for me at least, missing the whole point of the conversation, which is, let's even if I give you the point, which is a fallacy, but even if I give you the universe still there,
it's not a fallacy.
The genetic fallacy is a fallacy by nomenclature.
I'm not saying that it's necessarily true or false because of your wife. What I'm saying is that your wife influences how you view the evidence. Your psychological need for answers influences. I'm not making a true statement on whether or not your belief is true or false. That's the genetic fallacy. What I'm saying is, and it doesn't apply just to you, it applies to all humans. We humans are screwed up. And
that happens a lot in Switzerland, for example. People are atheists there for perhaps the same reason why, according to this type of thoughts that we're sharing, I am a Christian. But again, the same thing, Doug. What about? I mean, seriously, let's forget for a moment that I'm a Christian now. What do we do with life? What do we do with existence? What do we do with the big questions in life? If there are people that can live without answering these questions, I'm okay. That is okay. But what if, because even if we don't care about those questions, those questions, then that reality is still going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's seriously, this case of me meeting my wife and becoming a Christian is so insignificant to the actual claims of Christianity.
I agree. Huh? I agree. It's insignificant whether or not Christianity is true, but it is extremely significant to how you became a Christian.
That is part of the gospel. And this is not just, I don't become a Christian because of these big claims. It's good because the gospel is actually something that you can instantiate if you want to. And that's actually what I saw. So that is not a problem.
You saw it because you desperately needed it. You saw it because the woman you met and her father and the culture you were in the United States gave you an answer that you were desperately seeking. The best verse in the Bible is "Seek and you shall find." It works every time it's tried.
That means that it's true.
Yeah, that's a true verse. You know, if you're looking hard enough, you'll find exactly what you want to find. But I know you have to go.
Yes.
But it's been fun.
Yes, it's been fun. I appreciate this, and I appreciate these conversations so much. And hopefully, and if this is a possibility, we'll love to keep spending time with you and tackling all the questions in the future.
Yeah, let's keep in touch.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Sorry, I've been ignoring the chat. I saw Chet in the live stream chat. Chet in the chat. Welcome, Chet. It's been a while. I'll look at comments for 2 minutes and then we'll wrap it up. 2 or 3 minutes. Pine Creek, I suggest starting each interview with a prayer to Einstein in which you recite his quote. Yes, thank you to Pedro. I hit him pretty hard there at the last half. Not as hard as Scott the other day, the Roman Catholic. I hope Pedro was not offended by the Pine Creek theorem. And you know, the Pine Creek theorem could hold true for my wife. What if my wife leaves Christianity? Then, oh, you just left because your husband's an atheist. Yeah, Pedro's a nice guy. And you should go to his channel and watch him play saxophone. He's amazing. His channel link is in the description. He was the finalist in Spain's Got Talent. Doug, please host a Life of Brian viewing party. Nah. Pine Creek wasn't expecting the Spanish Inquisition. Ooh, good one. Derek says those benefits aren't unique to Christianity or theism, though. Hey, thank you for the donation. How probable is that? My tithe and message, I'm an agnostic atheist and I have hope, meaning in porpoise. All you need is a large tank. Poof. My big thanks to Pedro for showing up and talking to me. Take care, guys. Hey, I think I'm getting vaccinated today. Fun.